Yesterday, out of nowhere, it was confirmed that Riot is working on an MMO, which is probably the biggest project a video game company can go for. Unfortunately, it is in a very early stage, which means that it will take Riot at least 6 years to give us something playable. However, that doesn't mean that there are not things that we can talk about. Despite Riot not telling us anything, we know a couple of things about this project. We know that this will be set on Runeterra, which is a world which we know very well. And so we can already speculate what we will be able to see in the game. And that's why we sat down with TBSkyen and we had a look at what we can expect. So let's just get right into it. So yesterday, or 2 days ago, Riot announced out of nowhere that they started working on an MMO. And in fact, they announced it in the weirdest way, because an MMO is the biggest project you can make as a developer. And they announced it in the smallest way possible, which is through a single Twitter. There could be even a smaller way to announce it, which would be to tell someone at a pub and that person would tweet it, but that didn't happen. So, because an MMO is in production, I got TBSkyen here with me. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
And we will be discussing the only possible things that we can discuss about the project, about which we know nothing, which is really the basic structure, because really we know the world, and so we gotta know what to expect from the game in that sense. So let's start with our MMO experiences. Let's start with you, because I will probably have more experiences.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, the main MMO that I've sunk a lot of time into was Star Wars: The Old Republic. A few years ago now at this point. I've played like World of Warcraft for a couple of hours, but that's about all the MMO experience that I have.
I unfortunately missed it. I am so mad that I missed the old like Star Wars era when it came to MMOs, because I've heard it was really awesome, but then like every other person became a Jedi and suddenly it was awful. But
yeah, it declined a little over the years.
I missed that. However, I've been playing World of Warcraft for 17 years, I believe, right now. Really, the two games that I've been playing my entire life is League of Legends and World of Warcraft. And I've been into two MMOs. The first one is WoW, and the second one is one which I don't even know if you know about, which is WildStar.
Yeah, I remember WildStar.
That was an MMO that was really good, but it had one problem. It kind of copied WoW in a lot of ways, and that really just gave it a lot of things to do in that game. But the issue is that the people who liked that kind of MMO were already playing WoW. And so they didn't really have a reason to swap into that other MMO, even though WildStar was really good, and I loved that MMO. However, that game kind of died because people just stuck to WoW, and so WoW is kind of sticking around still.
Yeah,
With
WildStar had fantastic cinematics.
Oh, they had such a brilliant art style as well, and we will probably get into the art style in a second, but I quickly want to mention that Ghostcrawler was the one who announced that they are working on an MMO, and I remember Ghostcrawler from way back in the day when he was working on WoW. He was always nerfing druids and buffing mages, and he kind of became a meme in that sense, but he's a person that I believe was the senior game designer, which means that he was the person who knew about everything that was happening in the game. Whenever a new idea came by, he was the one who had a look at it and he approved it. So we are talking about a person who is a veteran when it comes to MMO, who is now making an MMO for the League of Legends universe. And that's really why people got excited about this, because we know that this project is in a really good hands. So that's just something I really wanted to point out, that it is not that Riot started making an MMO, which is a really dangerous project, because MMOs are the most difficult thing to get out. They are really expensive, and they are really demanding on good systems in the game to keep your players playing. So this is not an easy project, but Riot has the right people to do it.
Yeah, Ghostcrawler, he was a bit of a meme with the WoW community in the sense of they blamed him for pretty much everything that went wrong. But the thing is, like, he ran the biggest MMO in the world successfully for kind of a long time.
For a very long time.
He's probably the best person at Riot to be at the helm of this project, and then of course Riot have announced that they are hiring a bunch of people now, starting especially in January, to start filling out the staff that they need. So presumably this game is like at least a couple of years away before we even see trailers or anything. But yeah, he's like the right guy to lead it, I think.
I would say it's gonna be 2 years till we get announcement trailer. And then it's gonna be 6 years for like alpha or beta.
Yeah,
that's
probably.
My guess. I think 6 years is really the lowest point we can get.
Yeah, I mean it depends how much work they've done already, but my sense is like he just tweeted it at the point when it was like, okay, we have decided not to cancel this project anymore. So it's probably gonna be like I think you're right. It's gonna be at least 5 or 6 years before we actually get anything that can be played.
And you actually brought up a really good point that Ghostcrawler led WoW during its peak, which means that theoretically, right now in the entire world, Ghostcrawler might be the person to kickstart a new MMO, because there has, first of all, nothing passed WoW yet, or really ever, and second of all, he led WoW when it was at its best, and when he left it kinda went down and now it's kinda okay, but he really is the #1 person when it comes to MMOs, and I didn't realize that. So I kinda have high hopes, but yes, it will take time. So, as we mentioned, because the game is in a really early stage, there is not much we can discuss. However, there is one thing that we know about, and that is the settings. We know that this is gonna be in the world of League of Legends, which also means, because we know that world, that we can speculate about what we can find in the game. And so, today, I wanna talk about 2 things. I wanna talk about all the playable races, not just all the races, because there will be a lot of NPCs and just the world of League of Legends is quite rich, but playable races are something that we can discuss, and we can also discuss what classes we can find in the game, because an MMO has some tropes which like every game has to fill, so that shouldn't be too difficult to discuss. But then again, Runeterra has quite some unique people with some unique abilities, and so this might be fun to dive into. So, my first question is, do you think there should be a faction war? For example, in World of Warcraft, you have the Alliance, you have the Horde, those are the 2 main sides, and they are really a reason for the community to have some PvP going on. Do you think we should split the community into 2 parts, or do you think it should be like everyone can play whatever and they can kind of either group up with other people or go against them?
Yeah, see, that's the interesting question, isn't it? Because, there's some really obvious faction conflicts. We have Demacia and Noxus, we have the Freljord, who are kind of fighting amongst themselves, and then also fighting everybody else. We have Bilgewater, who has no allegiance, and just, will fight on any side that pays them. And then the Shadow Isles, which is, there's lots of opportunities to create sort of factionalism, but it's a thing of, there's too many regions. Imagine World of Warcraft, but with 10 different factions that you can join.
Yeah.
It's probably, from a game design perspective, a little bit too much. So it's like it could be interesting to be able to say, no, I'm a Demacian and I'm going to be Demacia on the battlefield or whatever, but I don't know how you would make it work, frankly. I think it's more likely that you get to be a character who lives in the world, and you can take quests from Demacia and from Noxus, depending on what you want to do.
I actually really thought about this, and I think there is a way they could make this faction war work. And that is, have on one side you have Demacia, and on the other side you have Noxus. However, you would need to rename the 2 sides. Noxus would obviously be the Empire, and Demacia would probably be something like the Rebellion, because that's really what Demacia has ever done, and ironically they are now being destroyed by their own rebellion. But the reason why I'm saying this is because these 2 sides, unlike all the other regions, first of all, they are the main conflict we have on Runeterra. I don't think there's another conflict besides Ionia against Noxus that would be this well known and this big. And both sides historically have been very inclusive. Demacia, or let's start with Noxus. Noxus is known for being an empire that is inclusive towards everyone. It doesn't matter who you are always useful to the empire. They kind of seem to be evil, but if you really go into the lore, you may notice that Noxus is not necessarily evil, they are just resourceful. And with Demacia, they work in a very similar sense, where historically, like before the Rune Wars, before the Great City even came to be, Demacia was also inclusive, because when mages were destroying like half of the planet, people came to Demacia, which at that time it was just a forest that was dampening magic. People came here to hide from the mages, and it didn't matter who you were. Like, you could be a human, you could be a Yordle, because we had Poppy there. You could be a Minotaur, because we know about Minotaurs in Demacia now. So, just like Noxus, the exact counterpart was Demacia. And so I think it would be possible to have two playable sides. One would be the Empire, and one would be the Rebellion, or whatever we can find on the other side.
Yeah, that could be possible. It could also be, like, if they really wanted to blow up the Demacia thing, it could be mages versus non-mages.
That would be interesting, but when it comes to classes and, like, balance between the two sides, that would be really difficult to pull off.
Yeah,
because
it would be a challenge.
Because most newer MMOs, the way they do it, when they wanna, like, focus on a fantasy of a class, they give both sides the same class, but they just rename it, and they rename the abilities, and they give them a little bit different aesthetics, but they essentially do the same thing. That way, you can preserve the balance of both factions. But with mages against non-mages, that would be so difficult to pull off.
Yeah, that would be very unique. I think Riot is ambitious enough that they probably look at World of Warcraft and go, ha, we can do something that's cooler than that. Like, I think that's kind of Riot's culture, is like they don't want to put out something that'll be, oh, it's like World of Warcraft, but I think they probably want to do something that's a little bit like, whoa, hey, hang on, how's that gonna work?
You're right, actually, on that. However, with that said, I don't think there is shame in taking from other projects and just making them better.
Oh yeah.
And when it comes to an MMO, I think that's really how you need to start, because an MMO is such a big project that if you start with something that's not working, it's gonna be so difficult to even finish the project. So, I think it would be easier. I actually wrote down some races for the possible two sides. So, let's start with the obvious. There are gonna be 3 races that are guaranteed. I will put my hand in the fire knowing these 3 races will be in the game no matter what happens. There will be humans,
yes,
obviously, on both sides. There will be Yordles. No doubt in my mind that there will be Yordles. They are just so, I don't want to say in your face, but they are very iconic for the world of League of Legends with Teemo and such. So, Yordles are definitely happening. Then, I think Vastaya would work.
Yeah.
Because you have your normal humans, and then to counterpart those those humans, you gotta have the Yordles to add to that. But we don't really have, like, elves or, like, other humanistic race that would really, like, be something more than a human. And I think that can be filled with the Vastaya. Just like your half human, half animalistic creature. You can, in your character creator, you can shape it into whatever animal you'd want. And I think that would fit the world really well. Now, with that said, with having 2 factions, I understand how the Vastaya could be part of Noxus. Because Noxus, there were 2 stories where Vastaya appeared in the Noxian army. The first one was in
the Syndra story,
one,
right?
Sisterhood of War.
Ah, right.
Was one. That was the first one, and that's a small reference there. At the very beginning, when Erath was traveling from his home village to Noxus, his leader, the leader of their squad, put a hand on his shoulder, and it was a furry, clawy hand. So that was a hint that somewhere in those villages there are actually Vastaya who are part of the military. And the other one is in Syndra's story, and that's the big one. Because in Syndra's story, there was a Vastaya with horns. He was like a wolfy kind of guy, I think. I can't really remember. Although, the catch with him is that he joined the military because he kind of had to protect his nation. He was like a double agent inside Noxus. With that said, I do believe that the Vastaya would fit Noxus, but I'm not sure if you could fit them into Demacia.
Yeah, because they're magical
I
creatures.
Yeah, I can't remember if a Vastaya ever appeared there.
No, I don't remember. Like, the thing about Demacia is that theoretically they hate everything that's magical. Like, even Shyvana has trouble fitting in there because she's a magical creature. So it would be... I'd be curious, like, because it could be that you have, like, some Vastaya are available, more like the Death Knight in World of Warcraft, where it's a thing that, like, can play for both sides, but you have to go to Ionia to do a quest and then you unlock them or something. Like, they could be sort of a thing outside of the main factions, but I could see a thing where Noxus maybe has Vastaya, but then Demacia are the ones who get to have the playable Minotaurs, maybe.
And actually, I think they could pull off the Vastaya by doing one thing. I think before they release the MMO, there could be like a bigger event where the rebellion is concluding in Demacia, and Demacia really returns back to its original roots, where they are inclusive towards everyone who wants to be safe, like no matter if you are magical or not. And they could achieve this through revealing Morgana, because, you know, all of this rooted from the conflict between Kael and Morgana is now hiding somewhere, and Kael is somewhere in the heavens. But once Morgana comes out of hiding, that rebellion could essentially end, and suddenly Demacia could be back in its original place, where they are just including towards everyone, and so Vastaya could potentially be on both sides.
Yeah, they can always invent some, like, and just write a reason why. Oh yeah, well, we're moving the storyline of Demacia forward, and now Vastaya are allowed to be there. Like that, they could definitely do that.
The potential is definitely there. And then, as you mentioned, my fourth race, which I do believe would be likely, and in fact, if they don't do this, I think it would be a little bit dumb, because we have Tauren in World of Warcraft. So why wouldn't we have Minotaurs in League? Because Minotaurs, funnily enough, appeared on both sides. In Noxus, they are now primarily being used in the arena, because Alistar's story kinda told us that Minotaurs were originally doing hard labor, and then Noxus was like, hey, why don't you join us? And the Minotaurs were like, we would rather stay alone. But half of the Minotaurs joined the Noxian Empire anyway, they slaughtered the rest of the Minotaurs who didn't join them, and so now half of the Minotaur population on that part of the continent is dead, and the other half is working for Noxus, with most of them being in arenas.
Yeah, and in Demacia, I remember we had some artwork for the Tellstones game, I think, where there was like a Minotaur lieutenant in the background, and something along those lines. So we know that there's Minotaurs in the Demacian army as well.
Not even that. I don't know if you've read the novel about that was like recently
not
released
yet.
about Garen. There is actually a Minotaur as one of the main characters in the Demacian squad. So
cool.
They are really leaning towards the fact that Minotaurs are in Demacia as well, and I love that. So Minotaurs could also be on both sides. And now here is where we can get into faction-specific playable races, because now we have humans, Yordles, Vastaya, and Minotaurs can be on both sides. We didn't talk about Yordles, but in Noxus we obviously have Kled, and there are also the Yordles who are running the different arenas, which was shown in Legends of Runeterra. And in Demacia there was Poppy, so why wouldn't we have other Yordles? So Yordles would also fit both sides. Now, there could be an exclusive race for either side, which would be a different alteration of the human race. For Noxus, we could have Shurimans. And if you wanna play with words, you could call them the Sai, because Sai is a Shuriman word for the desert, and also Sai is often used in your name when you come from Shurima. For example, Jax is originally called Sai Jax, because he's Jax of the desert. But we know that Noxus has launched quite a few campaigns to not to invade Shurima, but really to conquer some of the lands so that they can set up port cities and they can have influence on Shurima.
Yeah, they've been
So-
colonizing it.
Yes, and recently, Samira is a big player for Noxus who comes from Shurima, so that would be a really nice tie-in between those two regions. Now, on the other side, and this is a little bit of a stretch, but I think it might work, we could give, instead of Shurimans, Demacia could be given Iceborne.
This is true. Like, they could be working with the Avarosans or something along those lines.
And if you have a look at the map, it actually fits so well, because first of all, there is right now the storyline with Silas going to Freljord, and now Freljordians are siding with Silas, and they kind of want to go back to Demacia and plunder whatever they can find. However, he is dealing with the Winter's Claw. However, the Avarosans are peaceful, and they are just north of the capital city of Demacia. There is Recklstake, that's really one of the main places where the Avarosans are. And so the Avarosans are very close to Demacia, so there is no reason why they couldn't form an alliance. Especially since Silas is now turning some of the Freljordians against Demacia, so maybe the Avarosans wanna come in and ally with them because together they could go against the Winter's Claw.
That would make sense. I think that would make really perfect sense.
And it's also cool because Iceborne specifically have special abilities where they have like frost resistance, they could have, they can wield special weapons which like normal humans can't. So I think Iceborne and actually the Shurimans as well, who could have like some kind of a heat resistance and stuff like that. I think these two would make really good exclusive races for the two sides. And now here we come to the other two exclusive races. And the reason why I have 8, I believe. Yes, I have 8 in total. Because I looked at the original setup in World of Warcraft, because for WoW, the class and race combination just fit really well. The numbers were perfect, so I think if there is one thing that Riot should copy from WoW, it is the number of races and classes they had. So for the last two, and I don't know if this would really work, but for Noxus, I would love to see the Augmented. Because the Augmented, visually, they need to be in the game. Like,
oh yeah, definitely.
It's such a unique trope, and it would give them such a unique look. It would just work. But I'm not sure if having them exclusively for the Noxian side would work. I mean,
you could put the
Noxus...
Piltovans on the Demacian side then, like to have Piltovan nobles maybe or something along those lines, or some kind of upper class.
Yeah, you could have a... that's actually a good idea to have a noble race. That would be almost like elvish, but then again, we can't have elves. But...
like high elves and night elves.
Exactly. But the thing is that Piltover is somewhat being occupied by Noxus. So I'm not sure what would be the lore reason for Piltovans to join Demacia.
Yeah.
That's what I can't really figure out. It could be like maybe some kind of like trade route there, and they could be trading with them. But the clever way to deal with this would be to have Piltovans on the Demacian side and Zonites on the Noxian side. That would be the cleanest way to deal with this. But lore-wise, I'm not sure why Piltovans would join Demacia other than to like rebel against the Noxian invasion in Piltover. That's somewhat happening right now. Other than that, that's something I would love to see a reason for. And
yeah,
again,
I could see like the nobles of Piltover being like, oh, these filthy Noxians are taking over everything. Well, we need to kick them out. And then they join with Demacia specifically, like, kick Noxus out of Piltover for us, would you please? As sort of a political alliance, rather than like a ideological, but just like, this is useful to us right now. Kick them out of Piltover for us so we can have our own power. Because there are all those upper class families, like Camille's family, who are like desperate to maintain control of Piltover and so on. So there could be, if Noxus is threatening that power, that could be a reason for an alliance.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to mention, that there are ways how Riot can make it work. Like, they have so many tools in their lore to just like make Piltovans for no reason, travel through half of the continent to be there. But with that said, since this is leaning more towards Noxus, there is one more race which I would love to see in the game, because I think this is a heavily underrepresented race. But unfortunately, I think that would make a better enemy or NPC race, and that would be Trolls. Because we have Trolls in Freljord. Everyone knows about those.
Yeah.
But we also have Trolls in the south. For example, Jax has been heavily teased to be a Sand Troll. So we know that Trolls are around Runeterra, but I'm not sure if they would actually work as a playable race. That's kind of my issue with them right now.
Yeah, it's a thing, like, the Trolls are sort of very underexplored. So we know that they are in the Freljord. They're probably in other places, but we don't know much about them. Like, we know the Trolls in the Freljord are all sort of Trundle characters. Like, they're all like, "Rah, fighting, war, yay!" We don't know if that's the same, like, because if Jax was a Sand Troll, he's much more intelligent, he's much less violent. So they could be very like, it could be a thing of like, oh, Trolls in different places have very different cultures, and then it makes sense to have some on one side and some on the other side.
And, like, originally I thought that this is probably the biggest stretch of them all, but I would kind of like to see Trolls with the Avarosans on the Demacian side, because that would kind of make sense with the Iceborne as well. But I'm not sure if that would really work. I mean, as you mentioned, Trolls are kind of unexplored, and so there is the potential for having like more Trolls in the south, because all we know is that the further north you travel, the bigger Trolls there are, because the Trolls are trying to survive against bigger and bigger monsters. So in the south, we could have smaller Trolls who are on the Avarosan side, and I think that would make sense.
Yeah, it could work.
So, now with that said, that would mean that we have like 8 races, which I do believe is a nice number, 4 and 4 for each side. Now, let's dive into the classes, because this is where the world of League of Legends really shines. First of all, every MMO needs a warrior. There is no way you can have an MMO without your normal, somewhat boring fighter. However, in the world of League of Legends, being a warrior carries a lot of different things. For example, we can have Berserkers. And Berserkers could be on both sides, because Noxus uses Berserkers in the front line of their skirmishes. They are the first people they send in, just massacre whatever they can find, and then they send in the more sophisticated people who know how to wield a sword and a shield. And on the Demacian side, we have the Freljordians, who also have Berserkers in more of the Viking-y style, even though Olaf and that entire group are specifically with the Winter's Claw. If you have a look at Legends of Runeterra, you can see that a lot of other Freljordians, a lot of the normal tribes, they just use axes and they have that typical Berserk trope. I mean, have a look at Tryndamere. Even though he's using a sword, Tryndamere
He's a berserker.
is also... He is very much a berserker filled with rage.
Plus, if Demacia has minotaurs anyway, you know, makes sense.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Oh, you're absolutely right. And here is where I would love to see League do something different. I think the classes could be altered depending on who you are playing. So, you can have Freljordian warriors being berserkers. But you can also have, if somehow, like, ignoring all the races we named, if somehow you are able to play as an Ionian, why wouldn't you play a Blade Master?
Yeah.
Because Ionia is very much into swordplay and stuff like that.
And if you were like a warrior from Bilgewater, you'd be like a pirate, like a swashbuckler.
That would be so awesome, actually. Oh, and here's the cool thing. A warrior for either side could also have a different title. Because for Demacia, you have the Dauntless Vanguard. And for Noxus, you have the Trifarian Legion. So you already have a setup for warriors being slightly different for each side. Now, the second class that really has to appear in every MMO is a mage.
Yeah.
And here is really how things can get very interesting. Because Noxians have a lot of dark mages. They have anything from hemomancy to arcane magic to perhaps a little bit of borrowed power from shadow magic. So they can even have shadow mages. However, the more iconic things come from the other regions. For example, the elemental magic of Ishtal is very important in magic in Runeterra. But also, on the Demacian side, it would be really cool to play a Mage Seeker.
Yeah, so who has like tools and gadgets that work like spells.
But they are actually like stolen spells from
Yeah.
other mages. That would be awesome. And there is a reason why a mage could be on the Demacian side. Because Demacia is allied with the Arbormark, which is a nation of mages who live right beside them, and these two nations have been allied for a very long time, and so even though the Arbormark are mages, because the Arbormark never attacked Demacia, like in the history of ever, Demacia just has no reason to make an enemy out of them. So the Arbormark mages could legitimately be on the Demacian side as well.
Yeah, that would make perfect sense.
Now, class number 3, Assassin. Rogue, Assassin, anything that sneaks around and has 2 daggers. And here's the thing. You could have a normal rogue sneaking around, because that's your classic D&D style. But assassins in League can also have different styles. For example, and I kind of think Riot needs to do this, but I have no idea how they will pull this off. We need like Shadow Order assassins. That's because with Zed being at the front of League, Shadow Order and like the Shadow style of being a rogue assassin, that's really iconic for the world.
Yeah.
However, I think the Shadow Order would also make really good villains. So I'm not sure if it would be worth giving assassins to the players.
Well, I mean,
Instead of
again, it could be a
making them an
similar
enemy.
thing to like Death Knights in World of Warcraft, where like some of them are playable, but most of them are like enemy characters.
With that said, actually no, I'll save that for the last class. I actually have something really awesome on there. Next class, Shaman. Specifically, there are 3 ways you can deal with shamans. Or, you know, a shaman could have 3 different specializations. You can have a Spirit Walker, which would be your typical Udyr shifting through different stances and fighting with like animalistic magic. That would be awesome, because we have a lot of Spirit Walkers, not just Udyr, but also in Legends of Runeterra. Some of the cards for shamans from Freljord are awesome.
Yeah.
But a Shapeshifter, like a real, not Udyr, who is just like shifting stances and like his, the fur on his back like changes a little bit. Shapeshifter is a person who actually shifts into animals. So that would be like your classic druid from Diablo or WoW. That would work. Now, the last one would be a monk from Ionia.
Yeah.
Because
Kind of have to. Like with Lee Sin being so iconic,
Yes.
you kind of have to.
yes, and because like Lee Sin recently in Legends of Runeterra, he got his own like dragon order, or like they are not dragon worshippers, but they kind of are like dragon followers. I forgot what really the name of that group is. But Lee Sin is not the only dragon monk in Ionia. There are many like him, so a monk would make sense as well. Now, then there is the classic marksman. There is nothing really I can say on that. You could have... The only difference you could have is that in Demacia you have your classic marksman, maybe like Freljordians would make those. In Noxus you have those classic marksmen with the immortal shields, or whatever they are called now in League as the item. But you could also have like sharpshooters from Piltover with like Hextech
and Bilgewater.
guns. And Bilgewater. That would actually make an even better one. But on that topic, I did write a separate class, which would be a gunslinger.
Yeah.
And a gunslinger could be either a proper gunslinger from Piltover, using Hextech guns, or this is where pirates would come in. Now, here's the thing. With pirates, I'm not really sure how to deal with those. And this is gonna comes back to our problem of having two different, or a faction war, which is kind of limiting the amount of races you can have on each side. Because Bilgewater and pirates are definitely gonna be something people will be interested in.
Yeah, they could save it for an expansion.
That would work, actually. Actually, yeah, that would work. Because Bilgewater is trading with both sides. Bilgewater is really trading with anyone, especially with the black market. So they could actually join anyone. But I'm not sure. Actually, yeah, a pirate class would make sense. You're right. Because a gunslinger might be a little bit too limiting. I'm trying to think about what would be the broadest way to deal with pirates. But I think a pirate class would make sense. Now, here comes my favorite, which needs to happen, and that is Inventor. Inventor from Piltover or Zone, just coming up with machinery, something like an engineer, making little bots, making tiny weapons. That would make a really cool class.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
And I think that's really unique. I can't really imagine. In Wildstar, which I played, there was an engineer, which was like a guy in a mech suit. He had a shotgun and he had a little robot pet that was running beside him. But I think actually in most RPGs, I think those are called Tinkerers. But an Inventor just makes sense because just Progress Day and stuff like that, that's a big part of Runeterra and of Piltover, so an Inventor, in my opinion, would make sense.
It would make perfect sense, yeah, I think so.
And for the last one, I have exactly what you were talking about with Death Knights, where you have evil, but the players kinda wield that evil for greater good. And I think Riot could do that with summoners, specifically with the Void.
Oh.
I think because that was used in Icathia, for example. And were they not reckless and they didn't like unleash the biggest monstrosities they could wield, or they couldn't wield, it would have worked. And so I think that summoners who could summon little void creatures like Malzahar, that could be actually used as a friendly class with the players.
As a kind of warlock class.
Exactly. You have warlocks in WoW which work. They are the evil wizards who are summoning creatures which you normally fight, but you bind them with that magic. So a summoner class would make sense not only because summoners have been historically part of League of Legends for quite some time, but also with Icathia, there are occasions where the Void was actually summoned as a weapon, despite it not entirely working out.
Yeah, that would be a way to bring the Void into the gameplay.
That actually would be the only way you could do that, because I don't think there is another way.
No, because the Void would never fight for any faction, they kill everything.
And alright, now here's my question. If you know something that I don't. In RPGs, I have always played hybrid classes. I'm always someone who's fighting, and occasionally I buff my allies, heal them, stuff like that. And that's why I've always played something like a paladin, who's like a warrior, beefy guy, who's wielding light or magic. I don't think there's anything like that in League. I legitimately don't know if there is a beefy, kinda plate-wearing warrior wielding magic.
Yeah, maybe Solari? Warrior of some kind who uses sun magic, who knows?
I thought about that.
Visually, they'd be closest to Paladin, certainly.
I thought about that, but like giving the players something from Dargon, which is like so high up the mountain and, you know, it's so powerful, I'm not sure if that would work. Because if there is one thing I kind of want this MMO to go from, it's, or like to have it as a starting point, don't make the players powerful in the world.
Yeah.
Make them nobodies.
Don't make them champions.
Exactly. Make them like, don't make them ascended. That's like,
yeah. No darkened,
please?
No ascended,
Yes.
No aspects, none of that.
When I walk in the world and I find an ascended, I want to feel like there is nothing I can do to them. There is no way I can beat them. They can look at me and kill me if they want to. I kind of want to be that lonely, like, nobody who's kind of like walking around the world who has like nearly no power.
Yeah.
And WoW started that way, but over time, as you like kill old gods and like
Yeah, at this point, all the players are basically demigods. It's like saving the entire planet. Yeah.
And I really want Riot to avoid that.
Yeah, that's going to be the difficult thing, is like, because like the temptation would be to say, oh, what if you could be a stone weaver like Talia? But the problem is, if you have 5 million stone weavers running around in League of Legends MMO, then Talia isn't a champion anymore because there's nothing special about her. So that's going to be a difficult thing for them, is like getting powers that are kind of like champions, but which aren't better than champions.
It would have to be like, if you are a stone weaver, like Talia would have to be your trainer. She's the one who like gives you this power.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, they could that would make sense in terms of if they're moving the storyline forward like 10 years maybe, that a bunch of the champions would then be class trainers.
I think, and I kind of hope that Riot avoids champions as well. I think like the least we see of the champions, I think the better. I think like witnessing a champion in the world somewhere should be a rare occasion.
Yeah.
It's not like they are the main part of your adventure, because in an MMO, you are the adventure. You are the one walking around.
Yeah.
And WoW kind of lost this over time, because as they introduced like big characters, no matter what you were doing specifically, it now always involves a big character. And it kind of lost the feeling of you walking around with your own adventures. Now it feels like you are just following someone else's adventure, and you're just like, on the ride with them. Yeah. So
champions could be raid bosses, maybe. Like I could see a raid with like Aatrox as the final boss, because he can regenerate anyway. So like, hey, why not?
I kind of want to dive into that in your video a little bit too, because I do have a couple of ideas on like what we can see in the world when it comes to champions and stuff like that.
Yeah. But now, let me run some class ideas by you, actually.
All right.
Because I've been thinking League of Legends kind of has a class system already. So why not try and copy some of what classes are in League of Legends into like an MMO setting, so that you have like a Juggernaut class, for example, who looks different depending on which faction he's from. Like a Juggernaut from Demacia would be a big Minotaur, but from Noxus it would be a guy like Captain Farron. And then in Ionia, it's more of like a big monk character who can just take a huge amount of punishment, like that dragon aspect guy, who's one of Lee Sin's followers. And then Piltover and Son, we have the Augmented. Like, and then an ADC would be, for example, from Bilgewater, a marksman, like a gunslinging pirate character. But in Demacia, maybe it's a Purifier, like who does the ADC kind of thing. Because I think that would allow you to have like just a few classes, where it's like, oh, you can be a Juggernaut, you can be you can be a marksman, you can be a supporter, which would be the healer buff character, but it could look different. So it's like there's 100 different classes, but really there's only like 5 or 6.
Sounds really good though. Oh, I see what you mean, where you have a class, but the class, from like gameplay perspective and balance, it is the same no matter what you play. But depending on what faction you want to be from, or what region you want to be from, it changes visually.
Yeah, so like you have a DPS ability of some kind, but it like in Noxus it's some kind of swinging your big axe around really fast, but then in Demacia it's more of a dueling thing. Like who knows? Like you could have like a Fiora duelist kind of character who was an ADC, but they all like the numbers are the same, but all the animations are different. That would be very cool.
I think that's alright. That's actually that's actually a much better way to go with this. With the again, I'm not sure how like PvP would work then, and like how like if there would be any faction war, because PvP in an MMO is still a very important thing.
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing to balance.
And I think I've only played like 3 hours of Elder Scrolls, and I think like Elder Scrolls has like 3 factions even, and I'm not exactly sure how well that works. And then again, there are some other MMOs like Guild Wars, which like don't have factions at all, you just play whatever. So maybe you don't need a faction war.
Yeah. There's
maybe
also
you could be from anywhere.
Yeah. There's also Final Fantasy XIV, like which handles class completely differently by making it jobs. So that you make a character, and then that character can learn the job of White Mage, and they can learn the job of Tank, and so you can kind of swap between it, so it's not necessarily completely tied down that you pick one class and then that's all you can play. That would be a way to sort of have the adventure thing of like, I'm going to Noxus to learn to be a Reckoner or whatever, And then I'm going to Ionia, and I'm going to learn to be a ninja.
That's a really cool way how to handle like specializations and stuff like that. Alright, that actually works. I thought it would make sense for Riot to kind of copy WoW in this sense, in this structure. But the more you talk about this, even though Ghostcrawler has like all his tricks taken from WoW, or really he invented those tricks, it would make sense to like start their own way of doing things and make the players join whatever side they want to be and just make them choose essentially whatever job they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different ways to do it. I think WoW is a good starting point, though, as you say. Like, it's a great place to start from, but there are other MMOs that are really successful nowadays, like Final Fantasy XIV and like Guild Wars, which have been running for a long time, so there's plenty of places to copy from.
I think we can jump into that in your video a little bit more, because we could talk about like starting locations and stuff like that with that. But yeah, so for this part, that is gonna be it. We are currently in the very early stages of this MMO being made. All we really know is the world, and so at least we are able to talk about something. But that is gonna be it for this part of the video. And depending on if you watch this one first or TBSkyen's first, there is now gonna be a different video on his channel where we are gonna talk about the world and the setting and what we can find in the world specifically. So, is there any last words? Do you have anything to say?
No, not really, except that I'm very excited to see where this thing is gonna go, because as we've covered in this video, there's a million different possibilities and they all sound pretty cool.
And it really just came out of nowhere as well, so... Yeah. Speculations is all we can do right
Riot
now.
dropping this on us like a Friday evening in a tweet. God damn it.
As I mentioned, it is the biggest possible... There is nothing bigger than an MMO that a studio can do. And I really mean it. There is nothing bigger. And they just tweeted about it. And like, they could... even the smaller announcement would be if they like wrote something on a napkin and they like left it somewhere on a table and someone took a picture of it. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this video. You can now go to TBSkyen's channel, and there will be a second video there. So for now, I will see you next time.
Thank you, come again.
Thank you, come again.